Hi, everyone. My name is Melony Williams, and I'm the clinical supervisor at TLC Family Resource Center. And recently I did a presentation to a group of parents using some of these slides, and I thought it might be helpful for other parents to get the information too. So I decided to record a little webinar. If you have questions while you're watching, feel free to write them down. I'm going to give you my contact information at the end, and you can reach out to me with any questions or comments that you might have. But we'll get started. So I just put this little piece from SARC in here. I think there are lots of good reminders for us as parents how to really love a child. And yeah, I'll give you a minute to look at them. Search out the positive, teach feelings, express your love a lot. Those are some highlights, but lots of good reminders. So I just named it Strategies for Nurturing Parenting and Self-Care During COVID-19. I think the strategies would be helpful other times too, but definitely they're helpful during this time. And what I tried to do was sift through a lot of the information that I've been getting in my email or seeing when I'm exploring the web. And I tried to take some of those gems and really put them into this webinar for you to be able to look through and hopefully find something that will be helpful and meaningful for you. So this is how the webinar is going to be organized. There's going to be 4 segments. So if one of them doesn't look super interesting, you could always go forward a little bit and find the section that is interesting to you, because they'll all start with a heading slide. So feel free to do that. Again, it's kind of sifting through and finding what's helpful for you. Maybe you want to start with one section, but then come back and watch a different one. You can do that. The 4 sections are Wired, the science of what's going on in our minds and our bodies during COVID-19. The second section is Put on Your Oxygen Mask, the importance of self-care. Being There is section 3, How to Help Our Children Through the Pandemic. And section 4 is Where to Go for Support. And I'm going to give you a number of resources that I hope you will find to be helpful. So this is section 1, and each section has a heading slide. Like I said, this is what each section will start with. But this is a drawing of the brain from a book by Dan Siegel, and it's really talking about how the brain is built kind of like a house is, where there's a foundation and then the first floor and then the second floor. And that foundational level is really our brainstem, the parts of our brain that are responsible for survival. The next downstairs part of the brain is our emotional part of our brain, where we're taking in information and processing our emotional responses. And then the top, or the upstairs part, is the part of our brain that's really responsible for thinking and imagining and planning and problem solving. So I'm going to go into that a little more, but that's what this drawing is. I just think it's a great illustration of brain science. So here it is again. The bottom part of the brain is the brainstem, and those are things that we don't even have to think about. Our heartbeat, our breathing, our autonomic nervous system is taking care of many things going on in our bodies, so that we don't even have to think about them to stay alive. And then if you move up a little bit, it's our limbic brain, which is responsible for our emotions. And then the neocortex is at the top and at the front part of our brain, and that's where all of that higher order thinking comes in. So why is this important? When we are faced with something that feels threatening, we're functioning in the lower part of our brain, that survival space. Or if we're faced with something that causes us to feel very angry or very afraid, then we're in the limbic part. And when we're in the brainstem and the limbic brain, when we're functioning in those spaces, it's hard, if not impossible, for us to get to that neocortex where we can really problem solve and make good decisions and think in a rational, intentional way. So what we really want to do, especially during this time where there is a lot of fear and sometimes we are worried about our survival, we want to be able to take care of those pieces of our lives that are causing us to feel so much fear and to get into a place where we feel safe. Safety is really the key so that we're able to access that higher level part of our brain and make good decisions in terms of our everyday activities and also in terms of our parenting. So we have a negative bias in the beginning when we were cave people. Our survival really depended on us being able to see threats. And to some degree today, we still need to see threats, but we're also a little more protected. We live in solid structures most of the time, and we're able to get around. We have ways of communicating with each other that can hopefully diffuse situations that are tense. Yeah, just different ways of protecting ourselves. And so we don't need to always see the negative as much, but we're kind of wired to see things that way, to always recognize when a threat is coming. So in order to see the positives and step away from that viewpoint of seeing threats, we really have to work hard at that. And but we're capable if we can be intentional about it and make sure that we're really understanding that that's how we're inclined to be and that we're going to choose to be a different way, then we can see the world in a different way. So things that we can do to go against that negative bias is we can focus on what we can control. We can't control everything about life at any given time, but certainly not during this pandemic. We can also limit our exposure to the news. If we are constantly watching the news or listening to radio programs about the virus, our negativity bias and our constant looking for threats just gets activated, and we are in that lower downstairs part of our brain and not really able to access higher levels of thinking. I think this is probably partially what happened when there was a bunch of stockpiling and people couldn't get any supplies or enough supplies that they needed for families because others were really trying to make sure that they had everything they needed, and they were functioning probably from a place of that brainstem and really feeling threatened. So if we can make sure that we're feeling safe and not be watching the news, but check in a little bit so we know what's going on from reliable sources, then we can hopefully be functioning in that upstairs part of our brain and really be making decisions about how much food we need or how many supplies we need so that we can make sure that we're thinking about our families and also the families all around us, so everybody has what they need. We can also counteract that negative bias by intentionally practicing gratitude. I know that some days during this COVID-19 pandemic are really, really hard, and it's hard to find something to be grateful for. But even if we can find the smallest thing, it'll just help our brain to focus on the positives. And we don't need to do that in a way that negates all of the feelings that we're feeling or the difficult experiences that we're having, because those are real and those deserve our attention and our validation. But letting our minds and our hearts really think about something positive that's going on will be helpful too. And so now we're on to putting your oxygen mask on and the importance of self-care during this time. I think anybody who's traveled on a plane has heard that if the pressure goes down in the cabin, the oxygen masks will be released, and we're really adults are supposed to put the oxygen masks on ourselves before we put it on children. And that's hard as a parent to hear. And you think, oh, I've got to save my kids first. That's what I'm here for. That's what I want to do. But really, we have to take care of ourselves in order to be there for our kids. So if you haven't been practicing self-care, now is really the time to see if you can squeeze it in. I know there's a lot on everyone's plate, but making sure that we're okay so that we can be there for our kids is so important. So it all starts with us. I love this little picture at the bottom. It says, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. We're always filling up our children's cups, making sure that they're okay and they're, you know, managing schoolwork, managing the feelings of missing friends. But in order for us to fill their cups, our cups really need to be filled too, or at least have some liquid in them. Our children are looking for us right now. They're always looking at us as their models for how to interact with the world, how to respond. But I think even more so, they're doing that now because everything is so uncertain and different around them. So they're looking for our guidance, our reassurance. They're looking for us to provide safety and also a sense of stability at this uncertain time. There is this concept of emotional contagion that Bruce Perry talks about, and it's real. If you've ever been around somebody who is having a hard time, sometimes you can catch it, you know, and you're all of a sudden having a hard time too. It's especially true of anxiety. We can really be sponges for that, us as adults and also our children. So just being aware of that and trying to manage our own anxiety and other feelings so that we're not passing it along. Again, I've said this a number of times, but in order to be there for our kids, we really do need to take care of ourselves. So thinking about what does fill your cup. I personally like to be outside and be in the woods. It's just a different perspective, and being at the top of a mountain helps me to realize that I'm kind of small, and some of the stuff that I'm struggling might feel big, but it'll resolve. And I don't know what that is for you, but I'm hoping that you can figure that out and practice it a little bit. And if you want some ideas for figuring that out, then you can contact me at my email or text me, and we'll see if we can figure it out together, because it's not something that we come to naturally, I don't think. I really feel like we have to try hard and prioritize taking care of ourselves, because it is something that easily falls off our to-do list. So I'm here to help you figure that out if you want some help. There are so many unknowns, right? I just came up with this list, but I'm sure you could add 5 or 6 things yourself. But this is a time when we don't really know. And what helps us to feel better a lot of times is to know, or at least think we know. But there are a lot of things that we can't know and we'll just have to wait on. And so I think just acknowledging that is really helpful, and being okay with the fact that that is the truth. And that also the grief stages are applicable to our situation. I don't know how many of you studied these grief stages in high school or in college, but the 5 original stages by Kubler-Ross and Kessler were mostly applied to situations where a loved one passed away, but they're applicable to other times in life too, other situations where we're grieving. I have a friend of mine I went to grad school with that this is her niche. She really helps people to go through the grieving process, and it's really important. And it's important for us to acknowledge it and take our time. The stages are outlined here, but they're not linear. They're circular. You might go through denial, then hit bargaining. You might skip one, then you might come back a couple times. But The 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And those are the different parts of dealing with a loss. And there are a lot of losses. There are a lot of unknowns right now, and there are a lot of losses for us and for our children. I think on any social media website or platform right now, you're seeing high school and college seniors talking about the loss of that celebratory time in their lives, or that the celebration has to be different or not how they imagined it would be after so much hard work. And that's a really big loss. And it's okay to feel how that feels and to go through these different stages. I think that the stages just kind of normalize the struggle for us, which is really helpful sometimes. It's okay to be angry about our losses or to be depressed. And how do we move through these and get to a place of acceptance, and also to this added sixth stage that Kessler came up with, where we're really making some meaning out of our experience and making sense of the struggles that we're going through after dealing with some of these really important losses. So just some information and structure for our process right now. Perspective is important. I think I like this quote: happiness is letting go of what you think your life is supposed to look like and celebrating it for everything that it is. And there are moments when you might see this and it doesn't feel like what you want to do, and it doesn't feel like it's validating of the anger or the depression that you're experiencing right now. But hopefully at some points we can get to a place where we just accept what is. I think part of what makes us struggle a lot is wishing things were different. And I think a lot of us wish that things were different. But if we can notice those pieces that we're grateful for in what we have right now, that can help us to have some hope and keep going. So the next part, being there, how to help our children through the pandemic. We've been talking about us and kind of understanding how our brains work so far. And so what do our kids need right now? The most important piece for them is to feel safe so that they can move out of those lower parts of their brains and move into their higher levels of thinking. Predictable routines help us feel safe, and they help our kids feel safe. Just knowing what's next in a day can really help a lot. We also want to make sure that we're allowing opportunities for them to share their thoughts and their feelings. I know that, when you go to the grocery store, it looks different now. There's some plexiglass up and there's arrows on the floor. People are wearing masks, and there are just parts that are different. And if that's challenging for us as adults to take in, then it's probably challenging for a lot of kids too. And so just providing that opportunity to talk about that with our kids. So what did you think about that? That was interesting that those arrows were on the floor. Did you notice that? Well, how did that make you feel? How does it make you feel when most people around us are wearing masks these days? Just some questions to start the conversation, and a lot of times kids will take it from there. Yeah, they're noticing the difference and they may have questions, and we want to make sure that we're opening the door to those questions and offering reassurance and nurturance that things do feel different, but they're okay, and we'll get through this. And also giving information about what we'll do to get through this. We're keeping ourselves safe by washing our hands or wearing masks or whatever you are choosing to do in your family to keep everyone safe and going through this challenging time. Co-regulation is really important, helping our children to feel calm and balanced, or if they get away from that place of feeling calm and balanced, helping them to get back to it. And we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be calm and balanced all the time. If we lose our calm and maybe express it in some way that we don't feel great about, or that wasn't exactly what we intended, or doesn't fit with our parenting values, we can always go back and repair and say, this is a hard time for us too as parents, and we're doing our best. And I didn't take my morning walk this morning, and I'm going to keep trying to do that because I need to be staying calm and balanced so that I can help you do the same. We can be a model for our kids in that way too, that when we make mistakes, we try to make things better, because one thing is for sure, we will make mistakes as parents. It's just not a job that you can be perfect at, though some of us would like to be. It's just not possible. And in that repair process, lots of lessons happen too. So hopefully we can be gentle with ourselves. And movement and touch are really key parts of regulating. A lot of kids would like a hug or to sit close to you at this time, because without words, it just makes them feel safer. And movement, moving our bodies really helps us to get back to a place of regulation internally. I'm waiting for the slide to go forward. I've been having a little bit of technical issues today, so hopefully we'll catch up here. Oh. Yep. So I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Inside Out, and I have this link to watch this little video clip. I can't really do that and stay in this webinar, so it's here though if you want to watch it later. But it's really a clip where Bing Bong is really upset, and Joy tries to distract him from that feeling, and Sadness doesn't try to distract him. She sits and listens and gives Bing Bong the space to share what's making him feel sad and validates that. And the scene moves on. Bing Bong's able to move on and continue with his day. And I just think it's a beautiful representation of what we all need. Is just when we're having a hard time, having somebody to sit with us and listen and validate our experience and not fix it and not be worried that we're going to stay there forever, but just to sit with us for a bit, and then we're able to move on and keep going. So things to remember: the grief stages apply to the experience of our kids too. I'm sure you can think about some things that your kids are grieving right now. Maybe they're really into sports and they're not able to do that. Maybe they're not able to see their best friend or their boyfriend or girlfriend, things that are really important to kids at different stages in their lives. Maybe it's their first year in school and they were starting to settle in and really enjoy kindergarten, and now it's gone and you wonder how they're going to get back to it. I'm not sure what the losses are for your kids, but I know that we all have losses, and so thinking about them just helps us to have some empathy for where our kids might be acting out a bit more or a little bit quieter, trying to figure out what are some of those pieces that are hard for them. And then the next thing to remember is that we think of stress as a bad thing, and it doesn't feel good. So it does feel like a bad thing, but stress that's buffered by us being there and being attuned to our kids can really help them to build resilience. I'm sure as you're listening to this, you can think of a time in your life that was hard, and if somebody was there to help you through it, you probably learned a lot of really important lessons that you utilized later on in your life. And that can be what happens here too. We can help our kids through this time that is going to be stressful at different points. And we can help them by being there and listening and being okay with their feelings so that they can learn some lessons for other times in their life that they're inevitably going to experience stress too. And I really believe that we can come through this individually and collectively, and maybe become stronger in some ways by relying on each other through this process. There's some research about post-traumatic growth, those people who have gone through something traumatic and difficult in their lives and then turn out to be healers and helpers. And you might know somebody like that, but it's really powerful to watch somebody who seems to become stronger after something hard happens. And it's not an automatic thing. It doesn't just happen. You have something hard happen, and then you're strong. It's somebody who's really done the work and looked at that experience and had a group of people around them, or at least one person who really believed in them, who helps them through. And then they can come out on the other side even stronger. So yeah, something to think about for us. And connection. We want to stay connected as parents and adults, and we also want our kids to stay connected. We're talking a lot about social distancing, but really what we're trying to achieve is physical distancing, but staying socially connected. And how do we make those connections? If your child has a friend who can meet by video chat, maybe that would be helpful. I'm not sure exactly what would help your child, but maybe writing letters. There are different ways of doing it, but making sure that those connections with family and friends stay present is really going to be helpful to all of us. And breathe. We can take a second and breathe right now. Intentionally taking a breath gives us a little space between what happens and how we respond. So that's important in so many different parts of our lives, but definitely in parenting, and definitely when parenting during a very stressful time. If we can, something challenging happens and we can take a breath, that gives us just a little bit of space to think about, how do I want to respond to this? Because if it's really a hard day and lots of things are stacking up on us, we might be in that limbic system where we have a lot of emotions, and using our thinking brain is a challenging task for us at that time. But if we take a breath, or two or three, maybe we can access that higher level of thinking and really make a decision about how we want to respond that's going to be helpful and something that we feel good about. So breathing is really important. So where to go for support? It's really important for us to stay connected, all of us. We want to help our kids stay connected, and we want to stay connected too. And I just love this picture of the two bears. So what if this feels like too much? What if, this is too hard of a time for you to go it on your own? You are not connected to family, they live far away, and you just need someone. I don't know what your situation is, but it's okay. We're driven to connect to people, and especially during hard times. So I just wanted to give some options. Oh, and I also wanted you to encourage you to think about, what would you say to a friend who's struggling? I think sometimes when we're struggling ourselves, the way that we speak to ourselves might not be exactly how we would talk to a friend, right? We might say to ourselves, oh, just get over it. You shouldn't be upset about this. Everyone else on Facebook looks fine, looks like they're having a good time. But that it's okay if that's not your experience, right? And you wouldn't say that to a friend. You would say, what can I do to help? So maybe we can be a friend to ourselves sometimes too. But there are options. TLC is a family resource center, and we're still here for families through this time. We can't go to home visits like we had been, but we're meeting with people by video or by phone, and we're still here. And if you're watching this in another area outside of the families that we work with, email me and I'll help you get connected to a family resource center. There's also parenting support groups. I can tell you about those in our area, and we'll help you figure it out if you live in another area. if you need some counseling, there's centers that are open. They're still doing the video telehealth visits right now, but that can be helpful to connect with somebody. And then there's crisis support, and I'm going to give you those numbers. You know, if you find yourself in a really difficult situation and you don't have time to wait for a phone call back, you can call someone. There's people available 24/7. So I'm going to give you that number. And I would encourage you to watch this. I have the link here. Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, and you know, if you like this talk, there's lots of other ones by her on the topic, but we typically see vulnerability as a sign of weakness, but she challenges us to see it differently, that really being ourselves and putting our whole selves out there with our strengths and also with the parts of us that are hard to share is really a powerful experience and actually makes us strong. So I would encourage you to watch that, and I would also encourage you to share your real experience at this time. If things are going great on a certain day, it's good to share that, because it might give somebody hope that even though today is hard, tomorrow might be better, or maybe this afternoon might be better. And if it's a hard time, I would encourage you to share that, because maybe that person who had a good day yesterday can help you and be there for you, to support you through the challenging times. But we all have challenges. We all have parts of our lives that are hard. And if we're there for each other and really honest and open, then we can support each other in a really authentic way. So check that out. And if you want to know more videos by her, I could give you some links. And so I just thought this, we need to be vulnerable to be courageous, and courage is what is needed right now, right? So one of the key parts of being courageous is being vulnerable. That's what Brene Brown found. She's done so much research on people, and she found that one of the key elements of somebody being courageous is their ability to be vulnerable. And we do need to be courageous right now. We need to be brave and face challenges that are unknown and hard, and being vulnerable will help us do that, especially if we stick together. So this is just a list of community resources. TLC Family Resource Center is where I work, and we support families. And we also have a recovery center. So if you are struggling with substance use disorder, please reach out and I can connect you to some folks who would really want to support you on your path. West Central Behavioral Health does counseling for children, adults, and families. That's the intake number. And then they also have a crisis line where you could reach out and talk to somebody outside of office hours. Counseling Associates does mental health counseling. And then there's a Waypoint Family Support warm line. It's a warm line because you can't get connected to somebody right away necessarily, but if you call, then a family specialist will call you back and just chat with you and help you feel supported and maybe brainstorm options to make your situation feel a bit better. Dartmouth Hitchcock also has a psychiatric emergency line, which the number is there. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline has counselors available 24/7 to talk to you. There's the number there. And if you don't feel like talking, it's easier to text. There's the crisis text line listed there too. And then these are just some resources for some more information. If you listen to this and you thought, oh, I'd like to know more, these are some of the places that I've gotten some information lately and I've really appreciated it. Bruce Perry has a number of webinars on coping with this COVID-19 pandemic. And if you go to that website, you'll see them. He also does some live office hours, which you might be able to be a part of. UVM has done a webinar series on parenting during COVID-19 and adapting to changes in school routines. There's a couple different webinars on there. Brene Brown, that's the link to a longer talk that she did on vulnerability. The Jesse Lewis Choose Love Enrichment Program has a home program for families. That is an initiative started by Scarlett Lewis, whose son died in the Sandy Hook shooting. And she has a number of training opportunities and other resources available if you go to that website. The Strengthening Families program in New Hampshire created a coloring book. One of our staff members here at TLC, Sarah Bryce, drew this beautiful picture for it. And so there's all these coloring pages and then also some inspirational and educational words for parents too. And The Invisible String, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that book, but it's a book that reminds us of how we're connected. It's by Patrice Karst, and how we're connected even when we're not in the same physical location, which is really helpful at this time. And there's a workbook that goes along with it that has a lot of fun activities. So there's a link to that. And then there's also a book about the virus that I found to be really helpful to explain it to kids. And it's about King COVID, and there's the link to that there, and you can print it out and the kids can even color it. So you could talk about a page and then color it, or however you see fit to use it, but it helps us as parents to be able to explain what's going on. And if you have questions, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out and I would be happy to hear your questions. And if I don't have the answer myself, then we'll find it together, or at least do our best to do so. So thank you so much for listening and watching this webinar. And I hope you're staying safe and staying well at this time. Thanks.